First, you aptly captured it. The situation right now is indeed nightmarish, enough to put everybody, enough to remind everyone that this is a battle. This is a war that must be, won together. First, it's not a time to trade blames. It's not a time to apportion blames, rather. It's a time for us as a people, as a nation, to come together and hear one another, listen to one another, and then adhere to the measures already put in place to tackle this pandemic, so to say. Going by your question, it's important that we note first that no one prepared for this. No one expected it. The entire nations of the world never expected that something that emanated from a state in China, from Wuhan, would become what we totally incapacitate economies of nations, completely incapacitates all life's activities. No one expected. And that's why I sympathize with governments of the world. And when you narrow it down to Nigeria, for instance, we saw it when it started. We saw it as one of those things that happened by the way Ebola came, and it was possible that we could deal with it. If we knew better, we would have been a whole lot more prepared. And the first measure we would have taken was to stop every form of travels, especially trips from Europe and from America. But no one expected it. I can't totally blame government for what we are experiencing right now. But then I'd emphasize that there was need. At the point it became clear to everyone that this is indeed war and was ready to exterminate life completely, that government needed to put in place measures to make Nigerians understand that indeed war has begun. The drumbeat of war would have been sounded across the entire nation. And how do you drum the beat? Enlighten the people, educate the people. That is pressure form of enlightenment that is so compelling that for states that have not even experienced it would also be prepared that there is this danger. It's in Lagos, it's in Abuja, it's in Ogun State. And all hands must be on deck to see to it that this doesn't come in to their state. And it takes only enlightenment. It takes, bringing the people to the consciousness of the fact that this is a killer virus and that everyone should think in a manner that can be best described as, I want to capture it the way one governor in the United States said it. He said, behave like you have it, but thank God you do not have it. So such strategic campaign would have been put in place to first enlighten the people that there is war. A lot of Nigerians are aware of Boko Haram because, it became news for everyone. Coronavirus enlightenment program should have gotten to the point of each one tell one. Each one tell one. Not that you are selling fear, not that you are trying to build fear in people, but you're trying to tell people that we must deal with this and what are the measures put in place. Testing, tracking, and then treatment. With this measure, we also know that there is need for the lockdown. And government have brought in the lockdown. But of course, I understand the situation of Nigerians, why it seems that the lockdown is not working 100%. Prior to this time, the coronavirus is not revealing what our economic state is. We've had this kind of situation. But unfortunately, we now have something that is revealing the horrid state of the downtrodden. And they are the ones that need it most. They need this enlightenment. They need to be locked. They need to embrace the lockdown, adhere to the lockdown, so that this will not become a major community problem spread around the different communities. Unfortunately, I wouldn't know because I don't have the exact statistics to know if the palliative measures put in place by government is actually yielding results. But then we have cases in Lagos, we have the 1 million boys all trooping around, and then the whole concept of social distancing is failing. Nevertheless, the only way you deal with a problem is to deal with the problem. If attempts at dealing with this problem by way of lockdown so that there can be effective testing, effective tracking, and then proper treatment is all we need as a nation, as a people, to overcome and have our lives, and then we can build the future of this country, then government needs to get even more serious. And it may look like an imposition when they say there's going to be further lockdown because people feel the pain, the impact. But then, it's better to feel the pain and survive than feel no pain and die. The future of this country is again to be determined by how we deal with the coronavirus thing. Nations we thought had, 0 cases. We are beginning to see how unfortunate now we see it, as much as Singapore. No one thought that there would be a rise of this case in Singapore. Japan at one point, perhaps maybe because of the Olympics, had given us figures. Unfortunately, thereafter, as the Olympics was postponed, we now saw the rise. How come? America, thank God, Italy, for instance, have been able to deal with it to a certain point, but then there will still be, I'm sure there are measures put in place to check, to know if there's decrease or increase. But we're getting reports often, including from the WHO, that nations, these different nations, but my major fear is not even what is happening in the larger society. My major fear is Africa. The minds of African leaders. What's the thought pattern of the African leaders now? This is a time for African leaders to rise to the occasion and solve problems that the whole world can look back and say, if Africa can deal with this, then we can. But not just that they can, but that they can look up to Africa for solution. It is possible. We have a Hebrew stuff. This is a time that African leaders, must come together, think strategically, and proper solution. It is possible. Problems are designed for man. Man is also equipped with solution. But then it takes those who come to the table to think and find solution. Right now, Nigeria is looking for solution. The reason Nigeria was looked upon initially was because the way we managed Ebola was so clinical. It was so beautiful that America too wanted to know. So if they could repose such trust and confidence in us to manage crisis of this nature, health, then it's possible that we have what can solve this problem. I know it may be too much of a responsibility saddled on the continent, but it's a responsibility that the continent can deal with. I don't know the mind of AU. I don't know the mind of... I must emphasize it. I've said it, that African leaders can't go to bed now. They can't sleep right now. This is the time for them to think. So that when this problem is solved, because it's likely that you can solve it in America, you can solve it in Europe, but let it not be that Africa will now become the crying party. And then we have to depend on fundings and all that from foreign countries. There's a clear sign to all that where it emanated from Wuhan, that they've gotten their lives back. They've gotten their life back now, and there's life in Wuhan. So if it's possible to solve it in Wuhan, it is possible to solve it elsewhere in the world. And now let me also say that with respect to the palliative measures, and I've seen some religious leaders, especially the Christian folks, they've come out with items and some with money. I saw one donated 10 million recently to government and all that. It's beautiful. I don't know if it's part of social, corporate social responsibility. But I think the corporate bodies some corporate bodies have come, and then whatever gift and whatever money they gave, they classified it as a corporate social responsibility. I don't know if that applies to the church. It's a good thing that they donate to government in order to help the poor. But it's also, I think that there can be extra appropriate step. For instance, in the Christian fold, I think that the churches should find out what the register looks like for their members. First, for their members, if you have 1,000 member in a particular denomination, in a particular church, you want to know the welfare of the 1,000 members. And then if amongst the 1,000 you have 500 that are poor, then I don't think there's anything wrong if you get the accounts of those members and you begin to send money to them and said, as a member of this church, as one who brings offering, as one who pays tithes, whether it's meager, whether it is much, that this is time for the body to come together, because whatever charity you want to show elsewhere must start from home. Charity begins from your own domain, and I think the church should do that. The church should do it in a way that the whole world will hear and say, this is a family that is taking care of itself. And so if they're reaching out to government, it's surplus. I haven't taken care of your family first. Whatever you're doing, you're sending out to government is be more like to those who are not even members. So for me, I think that religious leaders should first consider their members. That's not to say you're being discriminatory. The disease itself, the virus itself, knows no religion, knows no tribe, knows no race, knows no nation. It's one that has hit the entire globe. If this had been, if this war that we are faced with, so to say, has been the normal warfare we understand, you can imagine one American down. The entire bomb in the whole Americas now would have been rained on whoever brings an American, and let alone you have 1,000 or more Americans dead. And so it's a war that we must win strategically. Fortunately, we have solutions have been proffered by way of social distancing, by way of testing, tracking, and testing. So what's the major thing that government should do? There should be enough kits for testing. It's not enough that you place a lockdown on people. They want to know if there's door-to-door testing, if you have testing on our roads. No, it's not enough for the security agents to be on the road and just stop the vehicles. Testing should be going on. And then tracking thereafter. Of course, then we have isolation centers for proper treatment. And then narrowing it down to the state of our nation when you look at it security-wise. I would say again, if you look at the entire picture, that nobody prepared for this. I seriously must commend the Nigerian police. I know we have cases, one or two cases here and there, but I must commend them because this is totally alien to us. Nobody envisaged that one day you look at our skies for 2 weeks and the skies will be empty and birds can fly freely and there will be no emission whatsoever. Nobody. There's no way I think any nation would have been prepared for a war against virus. No one. So for the security agencies, especially the Nigerian police that have taken responsibility of its, traditional role to manage internal security, to have managed the lockdown by way of, being extra friendly. And also see to it that, because if you look at the effect of the lockdown, people are bound to be heightened, especially those who can't afford 3 square meals. And so when some of them are on the streets, you need the police to be extremely very civil. And that's why I commend the Inspector General of Police who had come out early enough to say that and instructed that policemen on our roads and everywhere should be civil. And we're beginning to see the results. And of course, I know that government also put in place courts here and there, to mobile courts to deal with cases of those who default and all that. But I would say that to this extent, for the 3 states, the police have done incredibly well. And but more is required of them. There's an aspect that the Inspector General of Police handled. He was quick enough to enlighten the public with cybercrime, that this period there'll be, attempts, and of course there are, at cybercrime, and that Nigerians should be on the alert and avoid anything that will make them lose whatever belongs to them. So I would say that government needs to do more by way of fortifying our security agencies towards dealing with these with a friendly face, with a human face. That's all it needs. It's a collective effort. We all must collaborate with government. We must collaborate with the different security agencies that have been deployed out there to manage this crisis. It's a huge one. And then Nigerians, most importantly, I think that bombarding, including the social media with enlightenment packages, to make Nigerians understand that we are not being tortured. This is not like being sent into a hall of pain, but that we want to, as a people, win this war. And let's begin to look at benefits of the lockdown. Because when you don't explain the benefits of the lockdown to people, they will probably think that you have put them in solitary confinement, especially for those who can't afford anything. It's more like solitary confinement for them. But then when you begin to explain the benefits, you see, in nations out there, in America, for instance, people are beginning to understand what good neighborhood is all about. They're beginning to understand what family is. Families have been cut apart for a long time. Certain pressures had, split, kept family away from each other. Let's say that, even for me, I think it's divine that families can have this moment to be together. 1 month is long, but 1 month is not too much to save a soul, let alone save a nation. So I from every angle, this is going to cause, of course, we all know that looking at the global economy, for instance, it's already affected. Our nations should be prepared. For me, on a final note, I think that our country right now, our leaders, African leaders, should be prepared, not only to deal with this, but to prevent a resurgence of this virus. It is definitely going to rear its ugly head again. But then nations that are prepared to, deal with it, like China, for instance, they put in place everything possible to see to it that there won't be a resurgence, there won't be a revisit of this virus. Right now, our leaders should be thinking ahead of how we totally can become self-reliant under this pressure we are faced right now. Because the nation is locked to itself. To think right now, as a people, that we can look at our resources. You can see what's happening to oil right now. Look at, this is the lowest ever that we've ever experienced as an exporting nation of crude oil. And so this is a time for us to think the way forward. This is a time we must sing the song of victory, but it requires not just thinking, it requires strategic thinking, get the best brains, get everyone in all the sectors to begin to think, because Nigeria cannot go down with this virus. No matter the global economic meltdown or whatever, Nigeria must stand tall. This country has a future, and it requires the leaders, it requires the followers to come together and find a way forward. So my appeal to government is to continue the sensitization program, to continue the enlightenment, and then find strategic way of deploying these palliative measures so that those who needs to be cared for through the lockdown period can feel the impact of government. And so by the time we come out and there is any form of economic meltdown, we'll be able to come together as a people to win. It's important we know that this is not a disease or a war against the rich. Against the rich, it's not a war against the poor. It's not a war against a particular race or tribe in this country. It's everybody's war. And it will require everybody to come together, think together, hold hands together by way of thinking alike and fight to win. We must adhere to the lockdown. We must adhere to the principle of social distancing. If you hear the testimonies of those who have contracted and have suffered from coronavirus, it must be clear to all that coronavirus is real. Government must employ, including the least dialect, to, boost the campaign against coronavirus. I fear that at a time we think this is coming down, that perhaps there will be more cases out there. But then, even if there are, the Enlightenment program should be well funded and should go around the world.